Hey folks, how you doing? I had I made some content. We're off to a great start. I made some content the other day about a writing that I'm a big fan of, and that is Earl Nightingale's Acres of Diamonds. Not my greatest video. I'm not sure that video will ever see the light of day. However, what I really do like was the inspiration that I took from the video and from Earl Nightingale's 12 lessons from his writing Acres of Diamonds. If you have not read Acres of Diamonds, it's a very quick read, highly recommend it. If you've not seen the Akira the Don video on YouTube, that's a half hour listen. Highly recommend it if you're into such things. But it drove me to take some lessons from it of my own that pertain to the data industry and data analysts because it's what I'm interested in. Specific things, I'm looking over at the marker board over here where I have the lessons from Acres of Diamonds. Specific things that really inspired me, and those were when he talked about putting your imagination to work was a big one. When he talked about there are no bad jobs, it kind of said there are no bad jobs, just bad workers. Don't want to put it that way, but your job may or may not be bad. It may just be you and your perspective on it. Anyway, a lot of these things really got me to thinking about what are the differentiators between the productive workers and the unproductive workers, or the people that can't seem to get hired or can't seem to retain a job in data analytics. This is something I think about a lot. And we spend a lot of time talking about skills. And there's the big debate about, everybody's focusing on hard skills. Y'all know I am much more focused on soft skills, career skills, interviewing, resume, all that sort of stuff. But what Acres of Diamonds got me thinking about was maybe skills aren't the whole game. Maybe there are things that we can work on that aren't necessarily hard or soft skills. They're traits that we can develop within ourselves. And listening to those lessons that Earl Nightingale pointed out and thinking about how they apply to the analytics industry, I started thinking about what are the traits that make a good data analyst? What are the and then from that, what are the traits that make a good worker? What are the traits that make people recession proof, AI proof, and irreplaceable? And so what I came up with is how do you make yourself impossible to fire? And what are the traits of that person that literally is going to be like the last one out the door if a company is hurting? I'm a member of a company that's been through three reductions in force in the last, like large reductions in force in the last couple of years. There was a reason that certain people got fired and certain people didn't. Sometimes it was kind of random, sometimes it was a percentage of each department, but every department head had a choice. Do I fire Tom or do I fire Harry? There's a reason why Tom gets fired and Harry gets retained. And so I feel like those are things that people can work on, or at least can identify and say, hey, I've got a strength here. I need to accentuate that. I've got a weakness here. Maybe I've got to account for that. And I see commonalities between the people that keep their jobs and the people that don't. And the people that, if they get unemployed for whatever reason, they're not unemployed for wrong because somebody's always like, I must have this person. And they pluck them out of the unemployment line. What I noticed, very interesting here, what I noticed when I started thinking, okay, what are these traits? What do these people have in common? They all started with I. It's kind of funny. So, making yourself impossible to fire, another I word, it is kind of fun. And I didn't have to go to ChatGPT for this and say, hey, give me some alliteration here. It just sort of came out this way. There was one I had to think for a bit on it, but most of these just kind of came to me, and they all start with the letter I. I don't know if there's anything to that, but let's start out, and I'll talk about what these things are. If maybe you see that this is not a strong suit for you, how can you maybe cultivate those things? So let's get into it. So I'm gonna go ahead and write here on the marker board because y'all know I love my marker boards. Number one, the first one, that is interest. My handwriting's terrible. I've never focused on it, so whatever. But interest. Let's talk about interest real quick. Today is Monday morning. The video probably won't get published on Monday, but just know today's Monday morning. It's 8:30. At 9 o'clock, I'm gonna cut and print this video, and I'm going to start work at my 9 to 5 job. I got up this morning and, I thought about various things, but one of the things I was thinking of was the clients that I have and the technical problems that are coming up. And there was a sense of excitement. And I tell people this is what I love about data analytics in general. My job in particular is every morning I wake up and I'm actually eager to start work. Monday morning I wake up and I'm like, man, I've been kind of mentally tossing around some of these problems all weekend, and I can't wait to get started working on them. Now I do force myself to keep my personal time personal and my personal business time devoted to the business. So I don't tend to work on these things on the weekend, but yeah, can't wait to get started on this. If that's you, lots of people will sit there and talk, and kind of blather about their passion. Oh, I have a passion for data, passion for numbers. Some do, some don't. It's just kind of one of those funny things that people say. What I will say is this: if you truly have a passion for this business or for any business, you get out of bed on Monday with a song in your heart and you can't wait to start work. If that's you, you have interest. How many people truly have an interest, a passion for their work? I'm going to be generous here. In analytics is probably higher than some other professions, but I'll go ahead and be generous and say it's 50%. Helps if you write with the marquee part. There we go. 50%. Being very generous. But anecdotally, I've been very lucky. I've worked with some great companies and some wonderful people. Let's go with it. 50-50, right? 50% of people in data analytics are just jobbers. They're just coming in every day, with drudgery, and they're punching a clock and then they're punching out at the end of the day. They don't have personal interest in it. They don't read books about it in their off time. They don't do personal projects. It's a job, it's a salary. There's nothing wrong with that. But keep in mind, when layoffs start to happen, it's the people that treat their job like a chore that are often shown the door. Didn't mean to rhyme that, but just sort of happened. Okay. So how do you develop an interest? Tricky question on that one. I would just say it is probably just an entry thing. Like, just go do a job where you actually are interested. I would say one of the most soul crushing things when I work with a client that I'm trying to coach them in their career or develop their resume, and we're trying to figure out where they belong in the data world, and I say, well, what interests you? Which domain? What kind of line of work kind of piques your interest? And they say nothing. You're lost. Like you are at square zero. You need to go do some soul searching. So interest, that's kind of a key differentiator. I would say probably half of the people that I've worked with have legitimate interest in the work, and the other half, that they're getting paid. It's a job. Okay. The second one, once you have interest in your line of work, the second one, and this one is a pretty steep drop off as far as how many people have this, is inquisitiveness. If you have an interest in the work, and I would say you must have an interest in the work in order to be inquisitive. There's no jobber that shows up to punch the clock 9 to 5 that is asking questions, that is inquisitive, that is, you have to have one to have the other. But let's say number two, inquisitiveness. Inquisitiveness. Not much for penmanship, but I am big on spelling, so it's going to be real embarrassing if I misspelled that right there. Inquisitiveness. Now, this is beyond just general curiosity, because I feel like all great analysts have an innate curiosity. Where this shows up to me is it ties in a little bit with courage. True inquisitiveness is not shy. It is unashamed of its own nature. So if you are just curious, you might sit there with a question and never bring it up. If you are truly inquisitive, that takes it a step farther, and that's where you almost can't not ask the question. If you're curious about something, you've just got to know. And so that's the person that's got the guts to raise their hand, either physically or electronically in these meetings we have nowadays, in a room full of 10, 20, 50, 100 people, and say, I've got a question, boss. I don't understand this thing, or how is this going to impact us, or what is our strategy for? That takes some guts these days. But a lot of people, they don't even, they don't turn on their camera in meetings. They don't want to be present, like fully present in any real way. Rarely does a meeting go by. I've got a great workplace. Rarely does a meeting go by for us where there is not either some formal or informal method for asking questions. There's either a chat window where people can log questions. They ask for questions beforehand if it's a very large meeting, very formal. Or there's just, hey, just come off mute and ask your question. Um, Very few people take advantage of that. Again, I'll be super generous on this because the number is nowhere near this high, but we'll just to have a nice little step down. Being generous, I will say this is 25%. How does one develop inquisitiveness? Another tough question. I think for me, the difference is when I go into meetings and I can't think of a single darn question that I have, it's because I'm not all there. If I am fully invested in a meeting, if I am camera on, looking at the screen, not checking the phone's out of reach, I'm there. I'm in it. I've got questions because if you're thinking about it and you're listening to it and maybe you're writing some notes, it just naturally occurs to you as an analytical mind, as a curious mind. You're going to think of things where you're like, that doesn't make sense. Why did he say that? Or this strategy doesn't seem to be leading to our company goals, or I don't understand this acronym, or it can be something even that simple. So inquisitiveness, there's the element of courage to it. In order to ask a question, you kind of have to be okay with sounding stupid, or the potential that you could sound stupid. You might ask a question, you might fuzz out for a minute in the meeting, and you might ask a question that was just covered, and everybody's like, ha ha ha, ha, Al's not paying attention. Yeah. Okay. So there's an element of courage there. There's an element of kind of getting over your shyness and your introversion and all that good stuff we all have going on. But this is a key differentiator between the haves and the have-nots within the tech industry. If you just assume you know the answer, or almost as bad if you just say, I'll go look up the answer after the meeting, A, you're probably not going to go look it up. B, even if you try to do that, it's not nearly going to be as effective as just asking the person that actually knows the answer, because then you're going to get the straight scoop. And then there's always that other thing, which is like, if you've got the question, that means probably 10% of the other people in the meeting also have the question, and they're all afraid to ask. So you'll be their hero if you bring it up, even if it's something that just wasn't covered that well in the first place. Okay? So you got to have interest, first of all, and that interest leads to inquisitiveness. The way to develop that inquisitiveness is to be all in on the subject or the task at hand. If you're checked out, if you're multitasking is a myth. We all know this. But if you're multitasking, you're not going to be inquisitive. You're just going to be looking to get through and punch the time, finish the meeting. Okay. Number 3, and this is where it really starts getting to the unicorns, I want to say. And it shouldn't be that way. It really shouldn't. But number 3, where it starts getting super rare, is imagination. Just go with it. My G's or whatever. Just go with it. My capital G's are even worse. Okay. Imagination. What do I mean by imagination? What's required for imagination? I'm not talking about daydreaming during work. I'm talking about imagination with regards to work problems, business problems, whatever business you're in. This one's kind of a tricky one. There's sort of a dividing line here. And there's a dividing line here because interest and inquisitiveness, these can be the domain of entry level workers. I'm just going to make a big mess of this. You're going to have to go with it. Entry level can have interest and inquisitiveness. Okay? You got to get over your fear of being stupid and being the new guy or new gal, but it's all good. Interest and inquisitiveness, you can be Nick the new guy, and you can have both of those. The rest of this kind of requires you to have a little bit of expertise. So once you get an idea of the business problem, the role of your job, your boss's job, your department within the company, how the money is made, things that Earl Nightingale talked about, knowing about your job, your company, your industry. Then you can have professional imagination. Why? Until you develop that domain and that job expertise and that company expertise, your imagination is just kind of what if, what if, what if. That is, at least initially, that's of limited utility. Now, it's good that you're inquisitive and you're asking questions and you're kind of thinking of things that are within the realm of the possible. But until you actually understand things about the domain, things like the business rules, what must you do and what can you not do? We used to call them constraints and restraints in the military. But what do you have to do and what can you never do because it's against the rules? What resources do you have? It does no good to have the imagination to come up with a plan to scale the company you're working for to $1 billion in revenue when they're currently making 100,000 a year. Just saying. So great, good on you. Love that you're always thinking. However, we need goals that can be achieved, or we need to solve problems that we actually have at hand. If you're off there curing the common cold, that may or may not be helpful if you're in the marketing business. So imagination is kind of governed by, do you understand the business? Do you understand the business problem that your job and your department have? And do you understand what is within the realm of the possible? And then, can you think outside the box? So it requires you to have certain traits, but also requires you to have a little bit of experience and know-how. How much experience and know-how? Tough to say. It's one of those things. It's like being in love. You know it when it's happened. Usually it's very painful to develop that experience, but a lot of times you're at a job and 6 months in, you suddenly realize, hey, I'm not feeling like a fish out of water every day. I can actually come in and do the things that I need to do 75% of the time, and I don't have to ask 100 questions at every meeting and ask people what words and acronyms mean and things like that. Okay. So you kind of know when you have enough domain experience where you can exercise imagination. And then the other thing is you have to understand what the pain points are, what the problems are facing the business. What part of your job is difficult to execute, and is there any reason for that difficulty? Is it something that you can solve? Do you have the resources to solve it? Can you ask for more resources to solve it? What's the mechanism by which you can ask for those resources? All of these things require you to be in a place and in an industry for a chunk of time to develop that. Okay, so imagination in a constructive sense is not only rare, but it's also somewhat governed by experience. We're going to drop down even further because this is even more rare. Imagination, real kind of problem identifiers and solution inventors. There's another I word. Um, I'm going to say that's 10%. Now, I'm not a manager. I, I definitely think if I ran this by a manager, they would be like, hey, it's even lower than that. But I think it depends on company, it depends on industry. So, like I said, I've been very lucky with the companies and the industries that I've worked in. But yeah, imagination, constructive imagination, governed by expertise and directed towards problem solving for the business, maybe 10% of the people that work in the business. Let's cut it down even further. Number 4, and this derives directly from imagination. So we'll put a little arrow here. Number 4 is going to be initiative. And this follows directly off of imagination. So if you've got I'll stop talking long enough to write this more or less legibly. Yeah, whatever. Let's put some tails on our eyes there. So they don't look like ones. Okay, initiative. Initiative is number 4. Coming from imagination to initiative. Imagination is governed by experience, initiative also. Why is that? Well, imagination means you're trying to think of what's possible. You're trying to think of what are the pain points and what are some potential solutions. Initiative is then having the gumption, the bravery to go ahead and try some of those solutions that you imagined. Here's where we get into the age old permission forgiveness dilemma. Marines kind of laugh at this one because we're big proponents of asking for forgiveness, not permission. Not always the best policy when it comes to business, especially when we're talking about not getting fired. Anyway, but once again, experience, right? You have the experience to imagine solutions to problems. You have the experience to understand where within your job you can actually exercise initiative. Experience will generally tell you, there's experience with people as well. When you work with a boss for 6 months, a year, longer if you're lucky, you understand what we used to call your lateral limits. How far can you go left? How far can you go right? And you understand how much leeway and how much latitude they're willing to give you. So hopefully, talk about everything in the context of getting fired. Generally, you're not getting fired for these things, but in the context of like, hey, what's going to be allowable here? Because you don't want to piss away your time either. That's not helpful to you or anybody else. So you don't want to get chasing down a rabbit hole, and then once your boss realizes what you're doing, they're like, whoa, 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 whoa. Don't do that. That's going to be a waste of time for everybody, and it's going to get you in hot water. But understand where you can exercise initiative. Understand how far you can take a piece of initiative. How far can you exercise a solution that you understand could be a viable answer to a problem or a pain point. Okay. So true initiative, I'm gonna drop down even further. I would say 5% of people in the data industry exercise not only problem solving creative imagination with regards to their job and things that are going wrong, but also proper but aggressive personal initiative to solve those problems. This person right here we're essentially already here. They're impossible to fire. If you have a person that is a true problem identifier, problem solver, oh boy, you are essentially a unicorn at that point. Let's take it one step further. This is the one that I had to wrestle with the term just a little bit. And I always like to, there's a nice symmetry to 5. I don't know why. It's not an even number or anything. It's half of 10, I suppose. But things seem to just sort of work out into 5s for me whenever I come up with this content. I don't know why that is, but this 5 kind of has a perfect symmetry. Here's the 5th and final, and the like, you will never ever be out of a job if you have this. I'm gonna do a big reveal here, like we're doing home makeover or something. Inspiration. Okay, so we've got imagination where we identify problems. We've got initiative where we take off and solve the problems. Inspiration to me is you are taking that one step further. All of this can be kind of very technical. It's, it requires a certain level of bravery, it requires a certain level of intuition. There's another I word. It requires a certain level of expertise, but all of this can be done by more or less just technical experts. It doesn't require any great creative spark, really. Now, thinking of solutions that are like way outside the box, impossible solutions, as Benjamin Hardy would say, yeah, okay, that takes some creativity. Inspiration to me takes all of this. I've got the passion, I ask questions, I've got expertise and identify problems, and I take off and start initiating solutions to said problems. Inspiration to me involves the creative spark, and that's where we get down to like not actual unicorns, obviously, but truly unique individuals. Inspiration to me involves creativity. Like you can't go to sleep at night when you have an idea like the 5 eyes that make you impossible to fire. You can't go to sleep at night. You have the need to share this, what you know, with people because you're creative and because it's just got to come out. And this is where you're no longer only concerned with doing your job, because all the first 4 steps can just be self-serving, company serving. Let me do my job to the best of my ability. I have a passion. I want to know how to do my job better. I want to identify problems and I want to solve them. All of that can be kind of inward focused. One man fighting hole, we used to call it. You're doing your job for you. It's benefiting the company, obviously, because they're paying you a salary. But all of that can be kind of internal focused, individual contributor. Here's where you are extremely rare. Why? Because you're concerned about the community. What community? Could be a lot of different things. At the micro level, could be just your department, your team, you and your boss. Expand it out a little bit more, maybe your whole company. Maybe you have an interest in the job, you ask questions, you get some expertise, you identify a pain point, you find a solution, and now you publish that solution in a white paper or a blog post or some sort of knowledge sharing mechanism. This right here, the inspiration where you simply must share your lessons learned, makes you not only incredibly rare, it makes you not only impossible to fire, but it makes you immediately hireable if you ever do hit the job market. This is where you feel a responsibility. You feel like I have knowledge rattling around in my dome piece and I can't keep it there. It's too good. I've gotta I've got to share it with people. And this is where the real study of how do I create content? How do I communicate better? How do I speak better? Who is my audience? All of those things open up for you. How many people have true professional inspiration? Again, that might be generous. So the real tough one, how do you cultivate this? Well, the way that I cultivate it is I'm very mindful of the things that I take in to the old brain housing group. I've killed more than enough brain cells in my life through various means, professional and unprofessional. And I've reached the age where I realize I need to be careful about the influences and the media that I'm putting into my head. That involves, for me, the music that I listen to, involves even the food that I eat, the amount of rest I'm getting. But and you see the books over here. I didn't always have this many books. This is a thing that's been kind of a late in life process for me, and in seeking out more and more knowledge. The kind of social media you consume. You can consume professional social media. You can consume stimulating and rewarding and positive social media, or you can consume garbage. The kind of TV you watch, if you watch TV. You can consume positive and rewarding and constructive television or entertainment media, or you can consume garbage. The people to me that are truly inspired and truly inspire others are the ones that take in inspiration. And I think that's the common thread. If you ever go on YouTube, go on LinkedIn, go on read some of these books. What does everybody talk about? If you listen, they'll talk about where they get their inspiration. Each author talks about, I was inspired by this other book, or this other author, this other thinker, or my mother encouraged me to read X, Y, and Z. And so, it used to be in the kind of the heyday of blogs. They're still out there, but in the heyday of blogs, I remember they always used to have a blog roll. Well, what was the blog roll? It was all the blogs that blogger read. And so if you wanted to know how to write or think or be inspired like that person whose content you like reading, all you had to do was go over to the column and look at, this is the content that they consume. You want to be more like them? Do the things that they do. I talk often about the kinds of media and the kinds of inspiration that I take, the books that I'm reading. I do mean to do more of that, but there's only so many hours in the day. But I would tell you, Earl Nightingale, absolutely one of them. Almost anything that Akira the Don puts out on YouTube, I'm right there. I'm all over it. It's all positive. It's all thought provoking. I don't necessarily like all of it. I don't necessarily agree with all of it, but it's all very inspiring. Now, if you develop all 5 of these traits, and every one of you, if you're watching this, you're probably already halfway down this list. But every one of you can develop these 5 traits. You absolutely can. Every human person can do this. It is your choice what kind of jobs you get into, what you do when you're there, how you act when you're there. I had interest in inquisitiveness when I was flipping burgers at Wendy's. You can do that too. Okay. And imagination and initiative once I got there and I figured out what some of the pain points were. Everyone can develop all 5 of these. I feel like it's kind of got to be sequential. These things build off of each other. You're not going to show imagination or initiative if you don't have interest in the job. It's just not going to happen. But if you develop all 5 of these, number 1, you are impossible to fire. And then, as Beyonce would say, you're going to make yourself irreplaceable. And then you'll never have all your things in a box to the left. To the left. All right. There's my pop culture reference for today. You get the Earl Nightingale and you get the Beyonce. So absolutely felt like I really wanted to talk about this. I feel like there is the people out there that are hurting for a job. They're hungering for the knowledge of how to get it. There are a million influencers out there telling you what technical skills to get. You can go look up a million YouTube videos on should I study R or Python. You can go find quite a few YouTube videos on what soft skills should I develop. I've done plenty. There aren't that many people out there telling you what traits you should develop, what kind of personal habits you should have to be a great data analyst. If you pay attention to this stuff, I'd venture to guess the technical skills, they almost don't matter, which makes it ironic that I put my R shirt on today, but be that as it may. Folks, I hope you've enjoyed this content. If you do, give me a like and a subscribe if you would before you go. With that, Semper Fidelis, and I'll talk to you later.